Welcome to the Fairest Love Podcast, Single, Not Stalled, Pursuing Sanctity in Your Singleness. This podcast is for Catholic women who find themselves living the single life, whether it's by choice, vocation, or circumstance. Here we believe that this time is not just a waiting period, but a season rich with purpose, growth, and grace. Join your hosts, Monica and Katie Hinderer, two sisters navigating the single life from different perspectives as we dive into conversations about faith, friendship, professional growth, and finding joy in the everyday. Let's embrace this extraordinary journey together. Hi, Monica.
Hey, Katie. What's your
What's your joy for the week?
Oh my gosh. Well, we just had a girls' weekend. Katie and one of our sisters and one of our sister-in-laws. Unfortunately, the other two couldn't make it. And so that's the joy. We had a great time. Although I'm very bruised.
We played pickleball to give everyone some context. So there's this place near me that's called Chicken and Pickle, and it's like a chicken restaurant that also has pickleball courts all over. And I've been wanting to go forever, so I got us a court time and all that, and we went. People got really into it, and so then Monica ran into a couple walls, so she is super bruised.
Well, one of the courts, not at Chicken and Pickle, but at another place, the fence was too close to the perimeter of the court, so there wasn't enough room to like step back. But in the moment, you're not realizing that behind you there's a fence like a foot away, and so every time I would like jump back or whatever. So I've got some pretty gnarly bruises from the week, like bad bruises.
A couple on my legs from when the ball hit me. Nothing too bad.
That's good.
Yeah, I would say that was definitely my joy of the week as well. Although on Friday I leave for the Camino, so that's an anticipatory joy, I think.
Yeah, so everyone's going to be hearing this while you're on the Camino. We're recording early so that you can just be totally present on your journey. It's funny, Mom asked me, because our mom is going with, if I wished that I was going right now. And I was like, no. That's partially because I'm having some health problems. I was like, oh my gosh, the idea of doing that right now sounds awful. I was like, actually, like it was, so I was reminiscing on it, and I'm like, oh, like it was such a great experience, and I knew it would go by so quickly, and then that it would almost feel like a very distant memory, as it often does. But I am
exactly a year. Like this
Yeah.
trip aligns with most of our previous trip from last year, which is kind of cool. So, but we're doing a different route this time. So I'm going because one of my social media clients is a Camino like tourist agency basically. And so he was like, you should come on one of our Caminos. I was like, say less, I'm in. So, and then our mom really wanted to go on one when we went last year, but she couldn't because there were grandbabies coming up. But this time there aren't grandbabies due right now. So she's going, and so is her twin sister. So we're making a little trip out of it, and we're doing the Portuguese route this time instead of the Spanish route. So that'll be fun as well.
It was very exciting.
Yeah.
So this week, it's kind of a two-part series, which is exciting because what everyone will have heard right before this one is your interview with the M Code.
Yep. Yeah. So Laura, who was an M Code coach, she's amazing, Laura Rowland. And I've known her for years. We connected honestly, I think in like a Facebook group. I don't even remember where we initially. No, on Instagram. We connected on Instagram actually. And so she is an M Code coach, and M Code is motivational code. I think we talked about this a little bit on a previous episode. And so she and I had talked back and forth, and then she and I met after I took the test to talk through what are my motivators, etc. So maybe we talk a little bit about it. If you didn't listen to the previous episode though with Laura, it would be worth going back and listening because she really gives a full description of what the M Code is and why it's helpful and all of that kind of stuff.
Yes. Katie and I each then individually took ours to have them kind of to understand ourselves better and interpret them. And I think what I like about this one is that like Katie and I are still really big fans of the Enneagram and like, whatever other personality tests, but this is more of like, I think this is just so helpful in day-to-day life, or kind of the functioning of day-to-day life as it relates to like the work you're doing or the meaning you're finding in things. And that to me is very different than kind of a personality test. The personality test may suggest why I get along with particular people or why I like particular things or what, moves me to fear or to joy. But this helps me see areas of excitement and motivation, of areas of growth versus areas of kind of burnout. We talked about this. We mentioned it on our episode on boredom. And so that's what I like about this, is that I was like, oh, I can understand kind of work me a little better.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I think one of the things that I really liked about it is because you're looking at, I think it's 32 total motivators, and they rank them from your top motivators to your least
Motivating.
motivating things, whatever. I don't know what they're called, what we're going to call them. But to me, that was also really interesting because one of the things that Laura talks about, that she and I talked about in the podcast episode, was that um, your lowest motivators, you can do those for a time, but if you have to stay in that space for an extended period of time, that's where burnout often happens. And I thought that was so fascinating because then when I go and look at like my lowest ones, my lowest 5 are establish, make it work, collaborate, make the team, and systemize. And I was like, oh, this makes so much sense because I have always had a hard time on group projects. I have always had a time like being part of this bigger picture where like we're all trying to do the things and I'm trying to make the team and I'm trying to collaborate. Like I have a really hard time with that. And I'm like, oh, duh, because make the team and collaborate are 2 of my lowest motivators. So that to me is not exciting at all. I'm like, I don't want this. And I can do it for a time, but if I have to do it for an extended period of time, it's very frustrating for me and can be very overwhelming and therefore then very like burnout focused, right?
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, I think when I looked at it, I realized why, the way in which I have my current profession, it has some of my top 5, most of my bottom 5, and that's kind of what keeps you in this loop of like, no, but sometimes it's great. And I just have to find out how to make that sometimes always, right? And not really seeing that sometimes this is showing up, but that a lot of other times it's kind of the bottom 5, which is more of the burnout zone. And I think what's great about that is that it almost, I feel like for me, gives like permission to make changes and because the changes are just going to be probably better suited to you, right? And to be like, oh, this is actually a really good path for you, instead of trying to make the path fit, go find a path you fit on.
Yeah, it's interesting. Make it work is my second lowest motivator, and make it work as a motivator is like you're given some issue and like you can just power through it until it like is figured out and you can just like make it work, right? Like you can just like make it happen. And right now I'm in this like weird transitional phase in my business where we lost a really big client, and so I'm trying to restructure and I'm trying to figure all of that out, etc. And I was talking to her about this off script, and she was like, Katie, you need to make a pretty quick decision about this. And I was like, okay, tell me more. And she's like, because you do not live well in that make it work scenario where you're just like trying all the things and whatnot. And she's like, you need to make a decision pretty quickly that's going to like solve the problem, then stay in this kind of limbo space. She's like, because that's where burnout happens for you. And I was like, oh, this is so fascinating, because the month of April I was kind of living in that limbo space, and I had a migraine like every other day. Like almost every other day. I was like down with a migraine, and then I would get up and I would work a ton, and then I'd be down with a migraine, and I was like, oh, this is so fast. And she's right. Like I'm better off like figuring out the decision and making it than just sitting in this space being like, I can make it work. Like I can just like struggle through and like do the things and like somehow, keep things exactly as they are, but while I kill myself in the process or whatever.
Yeah, that's interesting. What I like about this, if you go to take your, code, does help you define what each of these things are, right? Because what I would hear might not be exactly like, I will be honest, I didn't love my top 5.
Interesting.
I had a little bit of a negative connotation to them. Well, because to me, at a cursory glance, they felt a little like egotistical. And I was like, oh, really? Because like my top 5 are be key, evoke recognition, make an impact, persuade, meet the challenge. And I'm like, is that like, but I don't know. I was like, I didn't love it until I kind of read what their definitions of each of those were. And like, I guess when I saw be key, I guess my initial reaction was like that, like I'm like the center of attention, and that's not what it is for me. It's that, like, essentially the way they defined it is like this is the person who holds things together and gives meaning and direction. Where I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, when you define it that way, like, yeah, I like that. I like to be able to like help facilitate that, and that doesn't necessarily have to be in an egocentric way. That maybe some, or that I even assumed the first time I saw that word, where I was like, I don't want to be like center of attention. Like, that's not what.
That's interesting. So one of the things that I've also found fascinating is, people who know Monica and I, like outside of the podcast or whatever, who know us fairly well, or often will say like, "You're so much like your sister," to either of us, right? And like in a lot of ways, we sound the same, but we're very different people. Monica's an extrovert, I'm an introvert, right? Like all these things, but we had some of the same top motivators. So Be Key was also one of my top motivators, as was Meet the Challenge. But my other ones were Meet Requirements, which was one of your lowest.
Yeah, meet requirements was my bottom five.
Yeah. And so for me, Meet the Challenge was top, then Meet Requirements, followed by Be Key, Finish, and then Realize the Vision. Which I thought was really interesting that we shared some top ones, but then one of my top ones was your bottom one of your bottom ones.
Yeah, and vision and finish are pretty low for me too. Meet needs. Like, but what I think is interesting is I kind of feel like if we had mom and dad take this, I think we'd probably find that their kids all have like a mix of their top 10, right? Because some of your top five, I imagine, are really similar to mom's. And I think part of this, the motivation code is like, this is how you were motivated as a child. This is within you as you're developing. Like, this is where you know, these internal drives. And I think a lot of those internal drives are created by your environment. And
Right.
I think dad wanted us to make an impact. He encouraged us to see challenges and meet them and to like be key players. And mom is really into more of kind of like the details of doing it right and meeting requirements and finishing things. And so there's sort of this kind of interesting, I'm just now piecing that together as you were sharing yours. I was like, oh, that's funny because I think,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
where some like the differences happen.
Mm-hmm. I have found this really interesting too, because like a couple years ago, I had a conversation with someone, and we were talking about freedom and all the things, and I was like, can you just outline what you're looking for, and I can hit that, like I can do that. And I think the same actually, I think with like a lot of jobs I've had. I'm like, if you tell me what you're looking for in this position, I got you. But if I don't know what's expected of me, I have a really hard time with that, right? So like for instance, I had a job that I like worked for a startup app, and startups are notoriously like vague job descriptions in which you're not really sure what you're doing. And so I was I was living according to the job description, and I got fired for not doing enough work. I was working 60 hours a week,
Well,
doing all the things, and I got fired because I was working the least amount of any employee.
what?
And now that I know this, I'm like, oh, this is so fascinating, because I was meeting the requirements as given to me from the job description that I applied for. But that's not what he was looking for, right? He
Yeah.
was looking for someone who was like going above and beyond, right? Or who was doing something else. And I was like, okay, I'm going to meet the requirements. I'm going to meet the challenge put in front of me with this job description. I'm going to do the thing. And I was like, oh, like this is fascinating.
Do you is like maximize or excel or mastery advance, are those in your top 10?
Gosh, no.
See, that's funny because I think those are in my top 10. I feel like I would have gone to that job, looked around and seen that people were hustling, and I would have been like, "Oh, okay. Like I'm going to maximize this. Like I'm going to work smarter, not harder. I'm going to start to get shifty." Well, shifty maybe sounds negative, but like to excel, I'm going to look at the other people around me and I'm going to like excel because suddenly there's almost like
Yeah,
a little
no.
bit of a competition happening. That's
I
fast.
know my top are like, those five, and then the other ones are like experience the ideal, gain ownership, which I think is pretty similar to like Be Key, excel, develop, advance, and then my yellows are more like make an impact, mastery, be unique is one of the yellows for me.
Really?
So it is, yeah, it's like really interesting. So I was like, oh, it's like, it's really fascinating to know this. And then like look back, I think, at previous jobs or previous like things in your life that you really enjoyed or you didn't enjoy. And then look at what your motivators are. And you're like, that makes total sense,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a really gentle way of being able to understand yourself better and saying like, this is why it didn't work. Because sometimes you can look back and just be like, what was wrong with me? That was a perfectly acceptable job. Or like, why couldn't I just like get it together? Or like, why was I so unhappy and other people were like thriving? Or people say you're good at something. Katie and I talked about this with as you know, as Katie was a teacher and it was like, you're so good at this. And she's like, I feel like terrible. Like, I don't want to do this. You know, and sometimes I think that when we look at things professionally, we often fall into what they would call like the sunk cost effect, which is, you know, I've put money into this, I've put time into this, I've put personal, you know, ego is in this, so I can't walk away.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to look at it and be like, the cost is sunk, the money is gone, it no longer matters, it shouldn't be in the equation. If you've got to go, you got to go. But most people, when they do that, they double down on their investment and they stay longer and they sink. They burn themselves out, they burn the bridge, they burn the business, they lose the investment completely because they just can't see the writing on the wall that it's time to go. And so I think what's nice about the code is that if this is where you're at professionally, or even maybe in a hobby or in something that you're doing and you're just like, man, it's not quite it, but I just don't know how to leave and I don't know where I would go and I shouldn't because I got a degree in this or I whatever. This is going to, I think, help you understand why you're not happy and what else you could do to start to change that and to kind of move through maybe a little bit of that paralysis we're experiencing for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's interesting when we were going through my results and I was thinking back on this and I was like, when I was meeting with Laura and talking with her about it, you know, one of the things that I tell people all the time with teaching is I loved my first year and hated the second year, which is usually the opposite of what people say about teaching. Usually most teachers hate the first year, but get the hang of it, love the second year, and then they want to stay. I
Yeah.
was the opposite. I loved the first, hated the second, gave it a third to see if which was accurate, the first year or the second year. Still didn't like it, went part-time and then did part-time for 3 more years. But what I think is fascinating is like, oh, I know, looking at this motivation code, why I loved the first year. Because some of my top things are meet the challenge, finish, and realize the vision. And I came in there with this like vision of what I could do with the theology department, specifically like how I could bring the capstone project to the
Yeah.
seniors. And so I got there, I realized the vision, I finished this like project in my head of like establishing the capstone project at this school. I met the challenge and the second year started and I was like, what am I doing? I already did the thing that I like envisioned in my head to do. And I think that's probably why the second year was so much harder for me because I no longer had this like vision and the challenge before me because I had done it already.
Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting. Which and I think sometimes if you don't want to like pivot careers, I think what someone would recommend for somebody like you is that you need a creative new vision every year then. You need new initiatives, you need to be the initiative driver in the school or you need to be this or that. And so then once we know that about ourselves, it doesn't necessarily that you leave what you do, it's that you can make what you do work for you. Or if you're in a small business, you like I know someone who she's very willing to hire kind of admin people to do the work for her because those are burnout zones, whatever kind of those categories are. And that's what she does. And she's willing to kind of her salary be a little lower to pay those people to do those things. Other people aren't as willing to do that. And so I think, you know, I convinced one of my friends to do this recently because she's also kind of making some pivots within her industry. And I said, why don't you just take this so that you're making like a best guess or an educated guess instead of just maybe this, maybe this, maybe this, maybe this, maybe this, and just chronically being like, why is this not working? Why is this not working? Which I think we can often get into that kind of that habit or pattern.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly, I think that's the benefit of having like the M Code coach, right? To like take it and then sometimes talk to a coach because like I was talking to Laura and I was like, okay, Laura, here's the thing, and she's like, you clearly are somebody who really likes a challenge. So you're better off setting small goals for yourself that you hit, and then you like create a new one. And I said, oh, this is so fascinating. This is why I like ran a marathon. And then I was like, well, did that. Now what could I do? Oh, wait, I could do a high rocks. And I'm like, okay, like now I did that. Now what's next? And I'm like, maybe I want to do an ultra, or whatever. And she's like, you need to set these smaller goals. Whereas other people would be really fine just being like a marathoner for their whole life. And she's like, but based on your motivations, that's never going to be like something that like you love, because you want the new, you want to be able to finish something and move on to another challenge. I was like, oh, this is fascinating, and also like good to know why sometimes things feel harder for me, like things that need more longevity seem much harder for me because the end is not really in sight, right? Whereas for others, like they're like, oh, no problem, I can just keep chipping away at this and it's totally good. But for me, I'm like, if there's no end in sight, I'm like, what the heck are we doing? Where are we going?
I can't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you think that there are ways to kind of manage that? Like, I wonder if for you, like those, like the virtues that maybe need to be developed are kind of to balance those scales, or is the idea that you just kind of accept it, you as the way you are, and just pivot life around that? Like, I imagine then for someone who needs to meet the challenge, if that's one of your top ones, to be content or at peace is hard. And that we can't throw that away because so much of life is mundane.
Right. Yeah. So like Laura's kind of recommendation for me was a little bit of both. Like, yeah, you do need to at some point be like, well, you got to stick to it, right? Like, but at the same time, her thing was like, well, maybe you need to find new ways of challenging yourself along the same lines, right? So maybe it's, like, this wasn't her example, but just throw an example, like let's say you're trying to like hit a certain diet, right? Like maybe you're trying to hit a certain like calorie goal or whatever. Maybe you do that for a couple weeks with a certain macro division and you see how that goes, and then the following week you switch up the macros but you're keeping the calories the same, right? Or you're meal prepping just chicken recipes for a while and then you switch it up and you're doing something else, where like you're kind of sort of changing the goal or changing the bar along the way for me, because that's something that's really important. And it's much harder for me to stick to something that's like, I already did this.
Wait, but
I've already seen I can do this, so like it's not exciting anymore.
In your top 10, you also have meet the requirements?
Yes.
Okay, so this is why I was like, I was sitting here thinking, I don't understand, because I would say meet the challenge is my 5th, it's my top 5. And if you told me, Monica, counting your macros is a challenge, I would tell you to F off. Like, I would be like, that's not a challenge and that's stupid, because that has within it meet the requirements and like architect or design. I have to construct what I'm going to do, and architect and design are my bottom 2. I do not want the small systems. I don't want to design it. I don't want to have to put little details together. I hate it. So I was sitting here thinking, like, how can we both have the same top one, meet the challenge, but there are certain challenges that I won't do, that drain me, where I'm like, this doesn't feel like a challenge, because let's say counting macros, 2 other components of that are my lowest ones. And so now this isn't meeting the challenge. This is draining me because it requires my lowest ones instead of my highest one. Where if if the goal was like bigger and required less kind of like, systematic step-by-step design, I would be like, yeah, I'll do that.
I wonder if this too is why I have successfully completed 75 hard multiple times and you have started a couple times and not finished.
Yeah, I've not.
Because I think 75 hard is a challenge, so it
Yeah.
doesn't meet the challenge, but it also has really strict requirements.
Yeah.
Which for you is really hard, but for me, my top 2 are meet the challenge and meet the requirements. Those are my top.
Yeah, and this is the other thing. Because if you looked at the results of 75 hard and the results were X amount of weight lost, X amount of this happened, X amount of that happened.
Yeah.
And if you put that there and you looked at you and I and you said, both of you need to do this in 75 days, I would say, bet. Absolutely, I can do that. If you said, here's a structure in which you have to do it, because meet the requirements and do it right are in my bottom 10. I don't care that you told me how to do it. And in fact, if you tell me exactly how to do it, now I don't want to do it. And I'm overwhelmed and I don't care about doing it right. What does that even mean, do it right? Like, there's so many paths to do something. But what are in my top 10 are maximize and make it work. So now that there are no rules and you've got a deadline, my gosh, okay, I will thrive. You want me to find a way to get that done? Done. Like, that gets so exciting to me when it's like, this is the Wild West and you got to finish. And I'm like, I bet you I'll get to that finish line. Heck yes, I will. But you hate that.
It is really interesting how I think, yeah, that is fascinating. And like that make it work is in your top because it's in my bottom.
Yeah, where it's like, listen, we got to find a way through this. And so, and I think it's one of the things that I occasionally like as a therapist is that you got to sometimes throw the rules away because it's not working for people. And you've got to find a way to make this work. You've got to find a way to get this message across to them. Persuade is also in my top 10. So, every now and then it's like, oh, there's a challenge, and I was able to like do it in like this kind of unique way of like doing it anyways, even though it seemed like impossible, and you know.
Yeah, it is.
But
That's really interesting.
this is interesting because I think that when you can have the language just gives us a deeper understanding, and then that helps us with direction. And so I think that, yeah, for the longest time, I was always like, I felt maybe kind of bad about or like annoyed with not being able to complete 75 hard, if we're just going to keep on that theme.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
this
to me it
makes
makes
sense.
perfect sense. Like looking at your motivators, your top and your bottom ones, why completing 75 hard is a lot harder for you and a lot less motivating. Whereas for me, it's so motivating. Like I'm always like, you know what I want to do? I want to do 75 hard again. Or all these other random challenges that I do, like the 12-hour walk, or like during COVID, I ran 1 mile every mile for as many miles as I could, as many hours in a row as I could do it. And I ran 13 miles. I ran 13 hours, 1 hour, one. But like, because that was a meet the challenge and meet the requirements. Because the requirements were really clearly outlined,
Yeah.
and it was a challenge that I could like push myself to. And I was like, oh, this is fascinating. And I also think to your point, like knowing the language is really good. And I think it could also help you in interviews or in
Mhm.
asking a boss for a raise or these kinds of things. If you know what your top motivators are,
Yeah.
right? You are going to be much better when you go into an interview and they say, what strengths do you bring? And you could say, you know what, actually, some of my top motivators are X, Y, and Z, and they're going to help your company in this way,
Hmm.
right? Or if you're asking for a raise, then you can go in and say, one of my top motivators is this. Like, I know this really drives me, and I've been doing this really well. You should give me a raise. I think it gives you language to help better explain, yourself to others professionally. That can be really helpful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I didn't think about it that way where, when they ask like, what are your weaknesses? Then I'm like, oh gosh. But you can really honestly go in and say, look, these are really low motivating things for me. These are a burnout zone. And there's just honesty there. And it's not that you don't do them, but it's that when I'm coming up to these tasks, it's going to drain me. And so I've got to either find ways to support that or minimize how much time I spend in that grind because
Yeah, or it's even being able to say like, I don't know, like for me, like collaborating is one of my lowest, but be key is one of my highest. And so
hmm,
I could say something like, one of my weaknesses is like being on a team is really difficult for me, but one of my strengths is like I like being key in things. So often if I can lead the team or if I can help direct the way in which it's going, I'm going to be a much better team player. And being able to know that about yourself helps in certain
yeah,
situations or circumstances, right?
fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I like this. Well, I would love for like all of our listeners to take it so that they just get a better understanding of themselves. You can also buy the book, The Motivation Code by Todd Henry, and that's kind of like explain some other things and walk it out. Or you could always sign up and get a coach, which I think would be awesome.
Yeah.
And then just start to kind of, I think it's interesting to look at your life. Some people may be like look at your life from that lens, which is then going to just like help you kind of run the race more efficiently, let's say. And some people, I'm thinking more about the 75 hard thing now because I'm like, wow, the people in our family who just really like loved it, took it, did it. Yeah, they are very like mom was so good at it. And it was like meet the requirements, do it right. This is like boom, prime zone. And our dad was so put off by it, he wouldn't even attempt it. Like he's like, I'll adjust it.
One
Like,
day, and then he
yeah,
was like, "This is dumb. Like, I worked out for 40 minutes instead of 45. That's stupid." And of course, mom was like, "That's not the rules."
yeah. And I bet you if we like looked at his, it would be like do it right or the rules would be like the lowest.
Totally.
Like which is the same for me. And so I think, it's like, well, maybe that's not the challenge for you. It doesn't mean that you can't meet these like different challenges in life or these different kind of like, popular, you know, challenges or whatever. It's just going to be like that one is actually not best suited for you. And
Yeah.
if we can find, this is what I say to my clients all the time, when we know ourselves really, really well and we know kind of what our strengths and weaknesses are, the Olympic runners, sprinters, and hurdlers, the hurdlers are only like maybe a second in their time behind a dead sprint. And it's because they know the hurdle, they know how to get over it, they know when it's coming. And so it's unencumbering to them.
Right.
Boom, they're through it. But baby hurdlers, have you ever seen someone, holy cow, have you ever seen someone hurdle for the first time? It's painful.
Yeah.
Like, it's taking them forever. They're tripping over everything. There's blood, there's tears. And it's just because they just don't know yet what are my hurdles and how do I get over them. And so I think the motivation code helps us, just live life kind of more efficiently.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like, for me, it was really helpful to take the test and then talk with a coach about it. Cause, like, you could read all the things, but, like, in my conversation with her, we were talking and something was like, oh my gosh, like, X, or oh my gosh, like, yes, I see this. And she, or she would point out, she's like, people with your patterns, like, tend to do this. And I'd be like, wait, I totally do that. So it was really helpful more than just taking it, but to like work with someone who's like super knowledgeable about this.
Yes.
And it's interesting because it was started by a Catholic. So there's a lot of different like Catholics out there who are like M code certified, who can kind of walk you through and teach you how to like apply it to your professional life, your spiritual life, your family life, and all of
Love
that.
that.
Yeah.
That is extremely helpful. So everyone should take a look, and I'm sure Katie has the contact information for the coach she talked about. Go back to the last episode, the previous episode, to take a look. But for now, that's it on this week, Single Not Stalled. We hope this episode gave you new insights and a renewed sense of purpose in your daily life. Wherever you are in your journey, remember that God is with you, and this season is filled with opportunities to grow, flourish, and make an impact. If you're loving this podcast, please take a moment to rate and review it. It helps more women like you find this community, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep living fully and walking boldly.